So there's an energy that takes place antebellum that you could call uh, noumena or phenomenon, right? That it exists in us as a phenomenon and outside of us as its own. Uh, I want to read something here, if I can get back to it here, where I put up under this Reddit Stoic conversation. There's this question: what is virtue? Right? After all, and that's something that I put a great deal of thought into. Um, let's see if I can actually get back to it, because it's a sort of multidisciplinary descriptor or example of. So my initial response looks like this. Okay, um, it shows this diagram of where principles. So everything is based on principles, moves on to ethics, goes on to morals, and then finally ends itself up in virtue. And Machiavelli discussed virtue. Virtue is so malleable that, but I want to read this. So virtues, principles are required now for entry. Okay, so a little further in, dealing with things as they come. In this worldview, this Weltanschauung, the measured pace of a true Stoic finds little acceptance. What is expected now is the falsified synthetic role of the entertainer. Validation has become a form of currency exchange. The impulse to embrace Stoicism arises from a desire to heal, to fix, to normalize within the context of today. So that's what I'm saying explicitly, is that the Stoic can only exist as a remedy of current modernity, so to speak. The Stoic sees, the Stoic responds, the Stoic improves, the Stoic prepares. These qualities emerge from within, shaped by experience beyond the self, right? So you get into the noumenon, or noumena, or noumenon, or phenomena, or phenomenon. In the end, entertainment would no longer be performance. The phenomenon is what we're experiencing, but the noumenon is in and of itself, in other words. Would be longer, would no longer be performance, but the quiet cultivation of subtle skills. Playing a musical instrument, composing a chart, recording an almanac. Yet the modern world is constantly gathering, interpreted, sold, and billed. So, in other words, the meritocracy has 100% taken over. Amid today's informational entropy and disruptive noise, that's kind of getting back at Jason Riza Giorgiani's illusion that has founded principles that go back to like the 1950s, 1960s. This daunting revelation about computer science and the fact that we're taking energy and storing it in computers, right? And that that is an amassment of entropy. We would be reaching this cataclysmic state where there would be too much, and particularly when there's a purge and suddenly there's all this entropy available. So it kind of gets into the division of and the cultivation of intellect as having taken place within certain circles, spherical bodies, and particularly within certain individuals, right? The routing of this. The true Stoic would gravitate toward mutual trade, pure proudhon, and a life grounded in transcendentalism, or transcendental means H.T. Henry David Thoreau Walden. Yet today's monetary system and the machinery of planned obsolescence directly contradict and nullify such efforts. In other words, the true Stoic could not exist here. And if they did, they would be quite aware that they were completely selfish in their pursuits, and it would no longer be considered Stoicism. So expounding this, these individuals may live lives deemed banal or boring by contemporary standards, yet how rare it is to find the richness and depth of such peace. To truly reach this state renders one vulnerable to all outside influences. I think of Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and then you have Timothy McVeigh and his response to this and the Oklahoma City bombings, right? Invictus, right? To conjure up Invictus, and yet there's this ever delineating and these perturbations, let's just say. The resilient evolution into the Stoic is inevitable and demands the uptake and harnessing of increased personal power. We live amidst an undeniable oversaturation of entropy masquerading as information, creating an asymmetrical leaching of base metabolic energy, the very energy the Stoic requires for self-reliance. And if you want to see this in simplified terms, all you have to do is watch Daredevil Reborn Season 1 that just completed. This is happening. You're watching the interplay of entropy, these archetypes, and it makes you want to go back and watch all things Jason Rizzo-Giorgiani on Prometheus. And the fact that in the end, as an archetype, as a meme, Jason Giorgiani is saying, all you have to do is fill in yourself as a meme, and to meet it in measure, your education, how you're able to process and delineate this. And for me, I consider myself, Jason Giorgiani, I could be called a Satanist. Yeah, he says that. So then you really get into his rendition, his versions of Satan as Satana. And you can't leave out hell, or Hel, as a feminine force as well, right? That we really are the male versions of the female. And reemergent is this multi-armed etheric figure that presides over this false universe as sort of a spider, but I digress. That it could only be like interpreted as a spider, right? Not to say that it is, but that is its structural component, an octopus or a spider. The Stoic is also an existential ledger, one that seeks assurance and a practical, physically rational explanation of kinetic movement. In essence, it, as the Stoic, as an energy, seeks to validate the noumenon as existing apart from the phenomenology. In this light, Stoicism becomes a retreat from the phenomenal truth that is blatantly flaunted in front of us today, or in front of its face, the Stoic, as an energy, as an entity unto itself. Stoicism may be seen as accepting only the first two states of matter, grappling with the third, and ultimately rejecting the fourth, which is plasma, right? And this brings us back to the root, the primary reason Stoicism persists, a blatant hiding from the aether, or the ether, whose presence has become undeniable, turning our world understanding or worldview entirely on its head. The aether, once dismissed, now looms as the edge of impending shared reality. Thus, Stoicism today is no longer just a discipline of self-mastery. It is a refuge against the unrelenting flood of immaterial truths, right? This true Stoic couldn't deal with it. Breaking through the cracks of modernity, it denies the plasma, denies the aether, and in doing so risks becoming a fossil of inner order in a world shifting toward energetic revelation. The Stoic then must evolve or dissolve. What was once sufficient, measured, calm, enduring, must now be infused with a new voltage. It is no longer enough to endure the world. One must transmute within it. You have to become something else. So it gets into Falconelli, the alchemy, right? That wasn't removed from chemistry at one time, just like the aether wasn't removed from the constants, the material constants of the world, that it is involved in this process. So generalization, the Stoic, in short, must evolve and realize themselves as a now fully realized energetic metaphysical occult practitioner, understanding now what was once hidden, as the Stoic is not a pacifist and truly had already been toppled over and consumed. Alexander the Great, as compared with Marcus Aurelius, which one would survive and retain themselves over the passage of time? Think about that. The unfortunate Alexander the Great literally thought that he was half God. So it hails back to Prometheus, right? Which one would survive and retain themselves over the passage of time? The unfortunate truth is that Stoicism would thus represent the mind, or really, Boltzmann brain, unwilling to manifest in its current state of obvious physics. So the fact that the Boltzmann brain says that a brain would emerge before the universe could be completed, and without the completion of the universe doesn't really know itself, but the brain, the Boltzmann brain, does. It could manifest at any point throughout the maturation of, so it's perceiving the universe before the universe is even done. And there's also conjecture to say that the universe might not ever be done, because it's so incomplete in the fact that it is really an aphorism, if you will. Cogito of what being is what one thinks according to an accurate Weltanschauung or worldview. So I'll read that again. Which one would survive and retain themselves, Alexander the Great or Marcus Aurelius, over the passage of time? And then where I inferred that Alexander the Great saw himself as part God. There was a form of Zeus that his mother thought that she was impregnated with, and then expressed that to him. But then you see figures like Hercules, and even more so Gilgamesh, and then Enkidu, right? It gets into these other areas that are studies in this that could go cleave off into Hinduism and show that these abstractions are really just the forms of the pure source and the refractions of it, and how powerful this pure source really was. And is Prometheus, Jason Reza Giorgiani's rendition of the closest to this pure source that we can get, is that character Prometheus. The unfortunate truth is that Stoicism would thus represent this mind or Boltzmann brain unwilling to manifest in its current state of obvious physics. Cogito of being is what one thinks according to an accurate Weltanschauung or worldview. Nietzsche, Aleister Crowley, and even John Dee find greater remedy through the lens of this abstraction, which is insane, and that's saying that. Of course, there are many more philosophers, philosophies, theologies, ontologies, but the above suffice in the general grandizement of the general message. In short, absolute power, that's Nietzsche, how to attain and retain it, Aleister Crowley, right? And really it does get into, in my opinion, what Aleister Crowley was displaying was a sort of misinterpretation by Michel Foucault of Nietzsche's work, but it wasn't his fault. It was the fact that that all happened after the Whore of Babylon, you know, all the workings to get beyond the Golden Dawn, and to say that the Golden Dawn died is kind of what Aleister Crowley's saying. I was rejected from, but the Golden Dawn died, and this is seeing itself now replay out in the regression, the digression of sex magic, thelema, that man is now shrinking back into himself, and he's becoming the bastardized version of man as woman man, that born of woman. And then so in short, absolute power, how to attain and retain this with a construct, the hieroglyphic monad. That really what John Dee was doing is he was trying to find the structure of monad, right? You could say it's heretical in a sense, but he was really looking for, he was saying kind of what David Hume was, but whether or not you revert back to this, in fear of the God archetype, right, is to say that we are going to build a structure on principle, on probity, and that this is what it looks like. And we're not saying that this is what it looks like. We're opening this up to where you look at this Weltanschauung, you look at the monad, you look at the workings that John Dee was grappling with, but then you can't remove, say, Prince Rupert's drop from this as well. That if you have the head of something that's nearly indestructible and impenetrable, but at the tail you have something so fragile and frail, you have to look at that as the construct, as the almond-shaped construct of what the monad really represents. That when exposed to this world, it becomes frail and fragile at its tail, but in the true world view of it, it wouldn't have a tail, and it would be this impenetrable head to Prince Rupert's drop that it could not be hacked into. So then we kind of see, what is this universe really about? Is it really trying to hack into this, the essence of this pure source? And that's what all philosophy and theology grapple with. You can't hide under the blanket anymore and pretend. Stoics become alcoholics by proxy, and thus are no longer Stoics by default, because they're no longer staying true to the application through dietary measure, as to say, I need to stay in this metabolic state, right? I.e. fasting, which you could go off on a trail with John the Baptist and many others and say that fasting was a fundamental aspect to this, and that metabolism is the hack to this and through this. And then you kind of, segue into Dr. Michael Levin's work as to find where agency really takes place, right? So you can't hide under the blanket anymore and pretend. Stoics become alcoholics by proxy, and thus are no longer Stoics by default. The tribe could not thus survive the witch's wrath. Think about that very carefully when you're thinking about all these people's work. Nietzsche's work being amended by his own sister in the last 11 years of his life, where he was pretty much becoming catatonic, didn't even know where he was and what he was doing. Look at Nikolai Tesla and how he was taken out of the situation, right? Look at all these people, right, that really were able to conjure and become the force, and then to notice that neither was this pure source invited into this world, but it was like, oh, we found you. We're going to try to hack in through you. We're going to torture you now and try to starve you away, right? That this spider witch type energy, right? That we're not claiming that this is an octopus or a spider, but that when you look at the armature from a universal cosmos, from a standpoint of actually seeing this, that this energy is trying to cultivate in everything and amass into a structure that says, no, I am God here, but now this is a dying universe, and that she is dying with that universe. This idea of Tiamat, Anu being the first god, that you could arguably say, this is Brahma, and to say that this is an amalgamation which could be better conveyed as a more ancient, archaic form in Abraxas. So, takeaway. The Stoic reserve must remain, but the cybernetic, psionic, metaphysical storm must be accurately responded to. This is, in essence, war in the current specter of our time. And where that war is taking place, obviously not in the physical realms, right? Summary, the Stoic stands knee-deep on a sinking island, brandishing a sword as the UFOs land and AI turns into biologically adaptable nanoclouds in a homogeneous state of mind toward chimera, which is to say that it is this amalgamation and this induction of other forms, where you could arguably say noumenon, into the phasic state of physicality that is the state of this phenomenon, right, of being and becoming.